A pager going off at 2:47 in the morning. A man running red lights on an empty road, not for thrills, not for trouble, but because somewhere behind him a 16-year-old boy was bleeding out on an operating table, and the only surgeon qualified to stop it was stuck 3 miles away. Within 90 seconds, that surgeon would be face down on the hood of his own car, handcuffed, while the clock on a dying patient kept ticking. This is the story of a wrongful detention, a $3.1 million settlement, and the 7 minutes that nearly cost a teenager his life because one officer decided a stethoscope didn't matter as much as a badge. Dr. Marcus Reeves was 36 years old and one of only 4 trauma surgeons on call for the entire county that night. He had trained at Johns Hopkins, completed his fellowship in vascular trauma, and spent the last 7 years rebuilding bodies that other surgeons had given up on. His hands had stopped internal bleeding in combat veterans, car crash victims, gunshot survivors. When the trauma pager went off, it meant exactly one thing. Someone was going to die in the next 30 minutes. Unless he got there first. He didn't wear a white coat to bed. He didn't carry hospital ID in his pajamas. When the pager buzzed that night, he grabbed his keys, his phone, and nothing else, sprinting out of his house in sweatpants and a faded college hoodie, leaving his badge clicked to the jacket hanging by his front door. He had exactly 11 minutes to make a 14-minute drive. The roads were empty at that hour, which was the only reason Marcus allowed himself to push the speed limit. He wasn't reckless. He was calculating, the same way he calculated blood loss and clotting time in the OR. Every second saved on the road was a second he'd have in surgery. He ran one red light at an empty intersection. Foot steady on the gas, mind already running through the incision he'd need to make. What Marcus didn't know was that 2 blocks behind him, Officer Brett Calloway had clocked his speed and watched him blow through that light. Calloway had been parked at that intersection for 40 minutes, bored, irritated, and still smarting from a reprimand he'd received the week before for an aggressive traffic stop that had drawn a complaint. He needed a clean arrest to balance the ledger. A speeding car driven by a man in a hoodie, running a red light at 3 in the morning, looked like exactly the kind of stop that would make his sergeant forget about last week. Calloway's lights came on. Marcus's stomach dropped, not from fear of the officer, but from the brutal arithmetic now running in his head. Every minute he lost here was a minute closer to that boy crashing on the table. He pulled over immediately, hazards on, and rolled down his window before Calloway had even reached the car. "Officer, I understand I ran that light, but I'm a trauma surgeon, and I have an active emergency at County General. I have a patient in surgery right now who needs me. Can we please handle this quickly, or can you escort me?" Calloway leaned down, flashlight cutting across Marcus's face. "License and registration. They're in my wallet, in my jacket pocket. I left my jacket at home. I ran out the door for an emergency page. My hospital ID and my surgical credentials are at the hospital. I can show you the second we get there. Please, sir, a kid is dying." "Everybody's got a story," Calloway said flatly. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus's pulse spiked, but he kept his voice level, the same controlled calm he used when a patient's heart rate crashed mid-surgery. He stepped out slowly, hands visible. "Officer, I am begging you. Call my hospital. Call the trauma bay. They will confirm everything I'm telling you in 15 seconds. There is a 16-year-old boy on a table right now who needs turn around. Hands on the hood. Sir, please turn around." Calloway's voice cracked through the empty street like a whip. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and spun him hard against the hood of his own car, twisting his arm up behind his back. Marcus's cheek hit warm metal, the engine still ticking beneath him from the drive. "I am not resisting," Marcus said, forcing the words out evenly even as pain shot through his shoulder. "I am not armed. I am a physician. Please, every second matters right now." Cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the metal biting into skin that, hours earlier, had been gloved and steady inside another human being's chest cavity. Calloway radioed in a routine traffic stop. No mention of urgency. No mention of a hospital. No mention of the words trauma surgeon that Marcus had repeated 4 times in 90 seconds. Marcus felt something shift inside him in that moment. Not panic, but a cold, focused clarity he recognized from the OR. The same mental state that took over when a patient's blood pressure crashed and the only way through was absolute control. He stopped pleading. He started memorizing. The cruiser's unit number stenciled on the dash. The time displayed on the dashboard clock, 2:54 a.m. The exact words Calloway had used. He would need every detail later, and some part of his brain, the part that had spent a decade documenting trauma cases for legal review, already knew it. "You're making a mistake that's going to cost a kid his life," Marcus said quietly. Not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. "I need you to understand that. Not for me, for him." Calloway didn't answer. He shut the door. Marcus was placed in the back of the cruiser while Calloway ran his plates and ID, a process that, by department protocol, should have taken under 3 minutes, but somehow stretched past 12. Marcus sat in the dark, hands cuffed behind him, watching the dashboard clock with the same focus he gave a patient's vitals monitor. Every minute that passed was a minute his resident, a brilliant but inexperienced third year, was operating alone on a teenager with a lacerated femoral artery. When Calloway finally returned to the window, his face had changed. But the MB record had pulled up Marcus's full name, his license, clean, no priors, and a cross-reference flag from a previous traffic stop 2 years earlier that had noted his occupation as physician, trauma surgery, County General Hospital, after a similar late-night emergency run. "You're a doctor," Calloway said, like the words tasted strange in his mouth. "I've been telling you that for 15 minutes, Marcus said quietly. "Please, I need to get to my hospital. Now." Calloway uncuffed him with shaking hands, stammering an explanation about protocol and verification that Marcus didn't have time to listen to. Marcus didn't argue, didn't yell. He simply got back in his car and drove the remaining 2 miles to County General, walking into the trauma bay 11 minutes after the page first went off, just as his resident was calling for a second surgeon to assist with a hemorrhage that had grown beyond what one set of hands could control alone. The 16-year-old survived. It took 2 units of blood, 40 minutes of surgery, and a margin so thin that the chief of trauma surgery would later say on record that another 5 minutes of delay would have changed the outcome entirely. Marcus didn't go home that night. He didn't sleep. By 6:00 a.m., still in scrubs, he was sitting across from the hospital's chief legal counsel, recounting every detail with the same clinical precision he used to dictate operative notes. The hospital's general counsel didn't wait for Marcus to ask for anything. Within hours, the hospital's CEO had personally called the police chief and the hospital's board of directors. 12 of the most influential business and legal figures in the county convened an emergency session that afternoon. This wasn't just an employee being mistreated. This was a documented patient safety incident, one that had nearly cost a minor his life because a responding physician had been detained without cause on his way to an active trauma case. The hospital pulled the dispatch logs from County General's own internal system, which showed the exact timestamp the trauma page went out and the exact timestamp Marcus had arrived. 11 minutes, when the drive should have taken 6. Marcus's resident, Dr. Priya Anand, who had operated those critical extra minutes alone, gave a statement that would later become central to the case. "I had a kid bleeding out and my attending stuck on the side of the road because an officer didn't believe a black man in a hoodie was a surgeon. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a system failure. The hospital's attorneys built the case with surgical precision of their own. Police dispatch audio confirmed Marcus had verbally identified himself as a physician responding to an active hospital emergency within the first 30 seconds of the stop, a claim Calloway never relayed to dispatch and never attempted to verify in real time, despite department policy explicitly requiring officers to confirm claimed medical emergencies before proceeding with an arrest. Body camera footage, initially reported by the department as corrupted, was recovered intact from cloud backup during discovery. It showed, unedited, Marcus repeating, "A 16-year-old boy needs me" 4 separate times before being forced onto the hood of his car. In his deposition, Calloway tried to argue he had no way of confirming Marcus's claims in the moment, that policy or no policy, a man running red lights at 3 a.m, was inherently suspicious regardless of what he was wearing or what he claimed his job was. The hospital's attorney let him finish, then calmly placed a single document on the table. The department's own emergency verification protocol, which required a 30-second radio check with dispatch for exactly this scenario. A check Calloway never made. You had a radio in your hand, the attorney said. You had 30 seconds. The protocol your own department wrote, signed by your own chief, required you to use it. You chose not to. Calloway shifted in his seat. I didn't think he was telling the truth. Did you think a county hospital's trauma dispatch system was something a man could fake convincingly enough to fool you in real time? Or did you simply decide, the moment you saw his face, that nothing he said was worth verifying? There was no good answer, and everyone in the room knew it. The court reporter's keys were the only sound for several long seconds before the city's own counsel finally asked for a recess. The county settled with Dr. Reeves for $3.1 million. Officer Calloway was terminated and is currently barred from law enforcement employment anywhere in the state, following a review board hearing that cited reckless disregard for officer protocol resulting in patient endangerment. The police department, under pressure from the hospital board and a wave of public scrutiny, instituted a new mandatory policy. Any traffic stop involving a claimed metaturia requires an immediate dispatch verification call before further detention. Dr. Reeves donated a portion of the settlement to fund a scholarship for underrepresented medical students pursuing trauma surgery, a field where black physicians remain dramatically underrepresented nationwide. 6 months later, he was back in the OR, back on call, still answering the same pager at 3 in the morning, because somewhere out there, someone always needs him to make it on time. This story is a reminder that seconds matter more than most people will ever understand, and that a badge should never outweigh a stethoscope when a life hangs in the balance. If this story made your blood boil, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more true stories of justice finally catching up.